Former ANC President Thabo Mbeki has just concluded a 3-day visit to the deeply divided Free State province in an attempt to create unity, renewal and reconstruction within the party. He was invited by the ANC's Provincial Interim Committee in the province. On Friday, Mbeki called for a complete reform, audit and vetting of the ANC's membership as one of the alternatives for bringing about change in the party. Joining us now to discuss this is political analyst Professor Seepe. Prof, thank you so much for your time this morning. Let us just start off with your take with this visit that the former ANC president has now taken to the Free State. Do you think it will yield any fruits?
Well, first of all, we must indicate that the former president has come back into the fold after having taken a break when he lost to Jacob Zuma. So you have a president who is known to have sulked in the past after he had lost. And he had also indicated in the past that he had no reason to campaign for the ANC because there was no good story to tell. But the things are worse right now, and he has actually come back. So when you have somebody like that who was tainted by the notion that when he lost, he couldn't take or sustain and accept the democratic outcome, some people within the divided ANC would be raising that issue. You need to understand that the divisions are driven not so much by that the members do not know what the ANC stands for. They are driven by what comes out as the rewards for being involved in the struggle. And right now, the ANC has been very keen in making sure that it enjoys broad support. It is that broad support that creates a problem for the ANC. And the former president himself mentioned that's why he talked about an audit. But if you're a party that is trying to increase its membership, you should understand that some people who you may not want may fall within the cracks. But ultimately, the issue of division, you must go back to the source. It cannot be a way of simply saying we want to remove certain people. And even those who had invited him are part of a particular faction. So the issue is whether a faction, as you rightfully indicate, that it's divided. So it means that those who had invited him must, first of all, be shown to be coming from two divided groups. But if they come from one group, it will be more about giving political weight to a group that had invited him. So it's very important in how you handle this matter.
Professor, I'm glad that you mentioned the issue around division. I mean, he did speak about this, and I'd just like for us to just take a listen to what the former president himself had to say around the issue of divisions within the party.
This phenomenon that is discussed, is raised here in this declaration, is not an exclusively Free State phenomenon. It's national. Branches are weak at best and dysfunctional, and at worst non-existent. We remain deeply divided, weak, paralyzed by factions, cannot resolve internal problems.
Now, Prof, we hear now him talking about these divisions. Do you think there would possibly be a way for them to find unity once again as the ANC, if it was ever united, actually?
Well, the report he gives, or what he was reading, is no different from what was read by the then Secretary General of the ANC in 2007, Halima Motlanthe. Halima was Secretary General at that time, and he talked about the factions, he talked about the weakness in the branches, and it was at the time when Mbeki and Halima were in charge of the ANC. But we also remember that it was also during that time that Mbeki wanted to run for the third term. So the divisions come way far back. So what would be necessary is for the people like him to first acknowledge that we are also a source of the problem, because when I was the president, I wanted to overstay my welcome. I wanted to run for the third term, and I was defeated, and I sulked. So you first acknowledge your role in the divisions, and say, now that we know that these divisions are costing the party, we need to start asking what are the issues. But you cannot deal with the issues of divisions without going back to the source, without also acknowledging what the causes are. So at the moment, these are just talks that the leaders of the ANC continue to talk about and repeat year in, year out, but they don't seem to have been move towards where they are actually resolved. You have issues where you talk about step aside, and when you look at that, you see the step aside rule being implemented selectively, where certain people are subjected to court and judicial processes while others are shielded. So until the ANC becomes consistent in how it deals with these issues, the divisions will continue. And it is the inconsistencies in the application of their rules and principles and resolutions that lead to these divisions.
Now, Professor, I'd like for us to just have a conversation around the issue of the ANC leadership in itself. I mean, when we look at that, within the top 6 even, there are those divisions, aren't there, that we are also seeing that is trickling down to all the other branches?
Well, I mean, take, for instance, the issue of discipline. The president of the ANC talked about 2 things, that when members of the ANC turn a blind eye to ill discipline, the ANC must deal with them decisively. He was making that statement immediately after the chairperson of the province of the ANC had decided to say, we are taking a position on supporting Cyril Ramaphosa for the 2nd term. That was ill discipline. Yet Ramaphosa kept quiet. If he had actually said, when I talk about discipline, I'm also talking about what just happened. So it cannot be, you cannot call for discipline, but when people are ill-disciplined in your favor, then you keep quiet. It is those inconsistencies. He also talked about that it is necessary for us to deal with corruption. And where there's a whiff of corruption, we must make sure that we report it. There you have a member of the ANC, Mervyn Dix. He listens to a tape where the president of the ANC talks about having knowledge, and say members of the ANC also know that the money belonging to the state was used for political campaigns. The law in this country requires that anybody who's aware of that must actually report that to the law enforcement agencies. President Ramaphosa did not do that. And what happens to Mervyn Dix when he takes it to Scopa? He gets suspended. So it is this double speak, this hypocrisy that causes a rift that makes it difficult for leaders of the ANC to be taken seriously. So if Mbeki wants to assist, he needs to point out all these things and say these are the causes of divisions. When you have a person, a minister who is incompetent, and you remove others, and you keep the minister that is more supportive of you, then you're not acting in a manner that is consistent, and you create the divisions. So the divisions have a source, and the source can be identified. So that needs to be dealt with. If you don't remove the cause of the problem will persist.
Prof, let's just take a closer listen to what the former ANC president had to say in the Free State around the issue of the ANC leadership and fixing the country.
Quality of political leadership. In the country, so that I sometimes say, do we have, I'm part of that leadership, do we actually have the capacity to lead the country to respond to these challenges? I think it's one of the serious challenges we face as a country. But we can't run away from here. There is nowhere to go. We can't emigrate. So we are here. Therefore, we've got to solve these problems.
Prof, that is quite interesting that he says, do they have the capacity to respond to these challenges? You just spoke about discipline, and that is one thing that they need to look into as the ANC. They've now gone ahead and disciplined, so to speak, the Secretary General Ace Magashule. He's currently suspended. What do you make of this visit by Thabo Mbeki to the Free State? And we know that the trial or the case against Ace Magashule is back in the court soon.
I think we may need to separate that aspect of the court. The judicial process and the court system must perform its function as independent of the organization. But the problem arises when the organization starts gets into what you call political prosecution, where those who are in government begins to suggest that these are the people who need to be prosecuted. We know, as a matter of fact, that the members of the ANC who are implicated in all sorts of criminality, misconduct, fraud, but there appears to be a selective prosecution, and this is what people on the ground are saying. Remember, we've been talking about these things since 2018 and 2017 when Ramaphosa became the president of the ANC. And the people on the ground, the voters who are watching, have actually sent a message that whatever we see happening in the ANC, whatever messages comes from the ANC, we are not impressed, because the behavior of the leaders of the ANC and of the ANC itself leaves much to be desired. They actually they hear the talk, but they don't see the work that supports the talk. So this is what the ANC must come terms to, because the people are saying, we are no longer going to be tolerant. We are no longer going to simply buy your story. And we are going to vote you out if you do not want to serve the people of this country. So it no longer matters, at least what the ANC says. The voters in this country have woken up to say we are no longer going to be misled. We have actually voted for this party for a long time. We believed in them. And the year in, year out, they continue to fail us.
Political analyst, Professor Sipho Seepe, thank you so much for your time this morning and for that conversation, of course, around what has taken place in the Free State. The former president the former ANC president and state president, Mbeki, was there this weekend.